The echo of dripping water, the flicker of a dying headlamp, a 12-year-old gasping for breath in suffocating darkness. My parents locked me in a coal mine when I was 12, and for years no one even knew I existed. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. They stopped sending me to school, handed me rubber boots and a flickering helmet, and said only one thing: "You're helping the family now." Helping meant crawling into the coal mine before dawn, my knees scraping wet rock, lungs choking on dust. I still remember how the darkness swallowed every sound except the echo of my own breathing. Every other kid in my class was learning math and writing essays. Me, I was memorizing which tunnels were safe and which ones might bury me alive. My father Howard called it building character. My mother Patricia just nodded like it was natural to steal a childhood. I didn't fight back at first. I kept my mouth shut. Same as always. I told myself, if I stayed quiet, if I didn't cause trouble, maybe they'd love me the way they pretended to love my little sister Haley. She was 7 then, too small for the mine. Haley was my reason for surviving those years. I'd sneak back into the house after my shift, black dust clinging to my hair, and she'd be there with a crayon drawing she saved for me. Every time she whispered, "I missed you," I promised myself I'd get her out of this house someday. The mine was hell, but home wasn't much better. Howard would stumble in drunk most nights, reeking of whiskey and rage. Patricia would disappear into her pills and soap operas, leaving me to figure out dinner from whatever scraps were left in the fridge. I learned to be invisible. When Howard got violent, I'd grab Haley, and we'd hide in the closet until his fury burned out. When Patricia forgot to buy groceries, I'd pocket loose change from her purse to get bread and milk. The worst part wasn't the hunger or the bruises, it was the silence. No one at school asked where I'd gone. No neighbors wondered why they never saw me playing outside. No relatives called to check in. We were ghosts in our own lives, and they were the only ones who could see us. At 15, something finally cracked inside me. I was coming out of the mine shaft, covered head to toe in coal dust, when I saw a school bus driving past. Kids my age pressed their faces to the windows, laughing at something one of them had said. I stood there watching that bus disappear, and for the first time in years, I got angry, really angry. Not the quiet, swallowed rage I'd carried like a stone in my chest, but something hot and sharp that made my hands shake. That night, I found an old flip phone Patricia had thrown in a drawer. The battery was dead, but I managed to charge it with a cord I found in Howard's truck. I started recording everything, Howard screaming about quotas and how I was worthless as tits on a boar hog. Patricia laughing when I asked if I could go back to school, saying I was too stupid for book learning anyway. I took pictures of the bruises on my arms, the cuts on my knees, the state of our house with its peeling wallpaper and broken windows. I documented everything like I was building a case, because that's exactly what I was doing. One morning, I walked into the Kespia's office shaking like a leaf. I handed over the pictures and voice recordings I'd collected, and told the whole ugly story to a woman named Sarah, who had kind eyes and took notes in careful handwriting. Howard and Patricia were charged with multiple counts of child endangerment and illegal child labor. I got full custody of Haley. I thought the nightmare was over. I was wrong, because 10 years later, last Tuesday, Haley called me from school, her voice trembling. "Dylan, I think Mom and Dad are here. They're waiting by the fence." My blood ran cold. I tore out of work like my life depended on it. Maybe it did. By the time I got to Haley's high school, my old pickup wheezing in the afternoon heat, they were already gone, but Haley wasn't lying. The school security camera showed a black sub idling by the gate for 40 minutes. Howard's broad frame was unmistakable, even through the glare on the windshield. My chest tightened. I thought we were safe. After the trial, they'd disappeared last I heard. Dad served 4 years and Mom got probation plus mandatory counseling. They weren't supposed to have contact with Haley until she turned 18. She's 16 now. That night, Haley barely touched her mac and cheese. She kept twisting her spoon, her eyes darting to the window every time headlights passed our small apartment. "What if they take me, Dylan?" she whispered. I swallowed hard. "They won't. Not while I'm breathing." But inside I weren't sure. If they were bold enough to show up at her school, they were planning something bigger than just a visit. I dug out the old box from my closet, the one with everything I'd kept from our first escape. Kespia's reports, photos of the mine. The tiny flip phone with the tinny voice recordings of my dad yelling, "Get in there, boy, or I'll show you real pain." I held it in my hand and realized something that made my stomach drop. This wasn't over. My parents weren't just trying to scare us, they were starting a new game. And I'd have to become the investigator again. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the floorboards, every car passing by, my body tense like a coiled spring. At 2 a.m., I checked the street from the living room window. Empty. Just the lamppost and a raccoon picking through someone's trash. I sat at the kitchen table with the old flip phone and my laptop. That phone had saved us once. Maybe it could again. The battery had long since died, but I dug out a charger and watched the little green light flicker on like some old ghost waking up. The first voicemail on the phone nearly stopped my heart. "You think you're safe, boy? You think the law can keep me out? Blood is blood." It was dated 2 weeks ago. Somehow, Howard had called my old number. I saved the file to my computer immediately. If they were already leaving threats, this wasn't random. They were building up to something. Haley crept into the kitchen in her pajamas, her hair a sleepy mess. "Why are you up?" she mumbled. I forced a smile, just making sure we're safe. I didn't tell her about the voicemail. Not yet. The next morning, I drove to the high school and asked for the security footage. The front desk lady gave me the usual runaround about written requests and proper channels. Then a low voice said behind me, "Dylan Carter?" I turned to see Officer Nicholas Cole, the local cop who'd handled my parents' original case. He was older now, with a heavier gut. But his eyes still had that quiet steel I remembered. "I heard your folks showed up," he said. "Come with me, let's talk in my car." Nicholas' patrol car smelled faintly of coffee and pine air freshener. He played the footage on his in-car tablet. There it was, the black SUV parked by the chain-link fence, idling like a predator waiting for its chance. Howard's face turned toward the camera for just a second, his profile unmistakable. "That's them," I said, voice tight. Nicholas nodded grimly. "I'll file a report." But since there wasn't an actual abduction attempt, my hands are tied. Best I can do is issue a trespassing warning. I wanted to scream, so they can just drive up whenever they want. He gave me a long, tired look. "Unless they touch her or cross onto school property, it's legal gray area. Keep documenting everything. Paper trails matter in court." That night, I started my own surveillance operation. I installed a motion camera on our front porch and dug out an old baby monitor from storage to set by Haley's window. Every small beat made my skin crawl. 2 nights later, the porch cam caught headlights sweeping over the house at 1:42 a.m., then slowing to a crawl. I sprinted to the window. A dark SUV idled for less than 30 seconds, then rolled away into the darkness. I saved the footage, my hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. Haley woke up to me pacing the hallway like a caged animal. She wrapped herself in her blanket and whispered, "Are they here?" "Not tonight," I said. "But they will be." By the weekend, I was running on nothing but caffeine and paranoia. I started mapping every piece of evidence on my kitchen wall like I'd seen in true crime shows. Porch cam clip 142 a.m. surveillance voicemail threat. 2 weeks ago SUV at school 3:14 p.m. stalking hall arrows pointed to one thing, they were circling us, testing my defenses, looking for weaknesses. I finally decided to check something I'd been avoiding. My father's old storage locker at the abandoned mine site. When Kespius had raided the house 10 years ago, they'd missed Howard's storage unit in the mine office. Nicholas had let me keep the key as part of evidence cleanup. Maybe Dad had gone back there. I left Haley with our neighbor Miss S. Jen and drove to the mine site, which had been shut down for years. The chain-link gate sagged with rust eating through the metal. The air inside the office was damp and stale, thick with the smell of decay. Dust coated everything like a funeral shroud except for one thing. The fingerprint scanner on Howard's steel locker had fresh smudges. I froze. My father had been here recently, and when I pulled the locker open, my stomach dropped to my feet. Inside was a stack of school schedules, maps of bus routes, and a photo of Haley walking home from practice. I stood frozen in that abandoned office, the damp air sticking to my skin like cobwebs. A single fluorescent tube above me flickered like it was struggling to stay alive, and on the dusty metal desk, my father's handwriting stared back at me. Haley 7:15 a.m. Bus route 4 Tuesday. Jim exits 2:30 p.m. walks alone Wednesdays. They'd been watching her, following her, timing her routines like she was a mark in some twisted heist movie. I stuffed every paper into my backpack, hands trembling with rage. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. If they were planning something, this was no longer a vague threat, it was premeditated kidnapping. I backed out of the office, scanning the tree line for movement. It was dead quiet except for a crow calling somewhere in the distance. I drove straight to the police station, slamming the evidence down on Nicholas's desk like I was dealing cards. He whistled low. "Well, that's enough to request a protective order." "I need more than paper," I said, voice shaking. "If they were planning to grab her, we can't just wait around." Nicholas leaned back in his chair. "Then get me faces, movement, times, you know the drill, you documented them once. You can do it again." He was right. I hated that he was right. That night, I called the only person I thought might believe me without question, Tom Brooks, the retired mine security manager. Tom had been the one who'd slipped me my first piece of advice when I was 12, record everything, kid. Howard's all bluster until the lossie's proof. He picked up on the third ring. His voice was gravelly but warm. "Dylan Carter, been a while. I need help." I said, "They're back. They want Haley." Tom didn't hesitate. "I'll bring my truck. Got a few toys in the shed that might help." 2 hours later, we were crouched by my front porch, setting up motion-activated cameras and a floodlight with a remote trigger. Tom even lent me an old trail cam for the backyard. "This'll catch them sniffing around," he said, clapping my shoulder with a weathered hand. "And if Howard tries anything, the law will see him for what he is again." For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. The plan was simple: catch them in the act, get footage to Nicholas, and get a restraining order that would actually stick. Haley peeked out the window that night and gave Tom a small wave. He waved back, his weathered face softening into something almost grandfatherly. I thought maybe, just maybe, we weren't alone this time. The first 2 nights nothing happened. I started to wonder if maybe they'd gotten spooked, moved on to easier prey. Then on the third night, just past midnight, the motion alert pinged my phone like an alarm bell. I rushed to the monitor. Heart hammering against my ribs, two figures moved across the edge of the yard. One tall, one shorter. My blood went cold as ice water. "Tom, they're here," I whispered into the phone. "Keep eyes on them." "I'm on my way." I crouched by the window, pulse racing, watching their silhouettes creep closer to Haley's bedroom window, like wolves stalking a lamb. Then suddenly headlights, another car turned onto our street. My parents froze like deer, then bolted into the tree line. I grabbed my phone and started recording the porch cam feed, my hands shaking so hard the image blurred. 5 minutes later, Tom's truck rolled into my driveway. I ran out barefoot, adrenaline buzzing through my veins like electricity. "I saw them," I said. "We got video," he nodded, but his expression was tight. "I'll stay tonight. Make sure they don't circle back." When I woke up the next morning, Tom was gone. No note, no truck in the driveway. His phone went straight to voicemail. When I checked the porch cam, my world collapsed. The entire night's footage was missing. My stomach sank like a stone. The folder was wiped clean. Only the system log remained, showing the footage had been accessed at 4:17 am after I'd fallen asleep. The last entry read, "Exported by user Tom Brooks." My first ally had just vanished with my only proof. I didn't even realize I was shaking until Haley touched my arm. "Dylan, where's Tom?" Her voice was small, almost a whisper. I didn't have an answer. I checked everything: the porch cam, my laptop, my phone, even the trail cam memory card. Every file from that night was gone, erased like we'd never existed. Someone had been in my house while I slept. I walked the hallway like a zombie, scanning every corner. No windows were broken, no doors forced, but my office door had a faint smudge near the knob. Someone who knew how to get in without leaving a trace. Tom, I wanted to believe he's taken the footage for safety reasons. Maybe he was scared. Maybe my dad had threatened him. But the ugly thought wouldn't leave my head: maybe Tom had been bought. By noon, fear had curdled into rage. I drove to Tom's place, an old trailer on the edge of town. The driveway was empty, blinds drawn tight like dead eyes. I knocked until my knuckles hurt, and no answer. That night, I heard Haley crying in her room. I sat on the floor outside her door, listening to my sister sniffle into her pillow. Every sound felt like a personal failure. I had sworn to protect her, and I was losing. The next morning, I went to the police station with the mine office evidence. Nicholas listened patiently, but when I told him the porch cam footage was gone, his face fell. "Without current video or a witness willing to testify," he said carefully, "we can't push for an emergency protective order. Paper alone isn't enough for a judge, but they're circling our house like vultures." I snapped. He sighed. "Then you need to leave. Take Haley somewhere safe until we can build a stronger case." Leaving felt like giving up, but staying felt like painting a target on my sister's back. By that evening, I'd packed 2 duffel bags and driven us to a cheap motel off the highway. The air smelled like bleach and stale cigarettes, but at least there were 2 locks on the door. Haley curled up on the bed, clutching her stuffed fox. She hadn't slept properly in days, and dark circles ringed her eyes like bruises. "Dylan, what if they get me anyway?" she murmured. I forced a smile I didn't feel. "Then they'll have to go through me first." Around 1 a.m., my phone buzzed. "No caller ID," I answered, pulse hammering. A voice I knew too well slithered through the line. "You can't hide her forever." Boy, blood finds blood. Then silence. I stared at the phone, bile rising in my throat. They knew where we were. The next morning, the motel manager knocked on our door with the enthusiasm of someone delivering bad news. "Hey, you Dylan Carter?" he asked. I froze. "Yeah, why?" He handed me a printed notice. Someone had filed a noise complaint with a photo of me and Haley entering our room the night before. It was the same photo I'd seen in the mine locker, printed in grainy black and white. "You gotta leave," the manager said. "Owner says he doesn't want trouble. Cops have already been called once." I tried to argue, but he was already walking away, keys jingling like wind chimes. By noon, we were back in the truck, duffel bags on the floor, nowhere to go that felt safe. Home wasn't safe. The motel wasn't safe. Test BS couldn't move fast enough. Haley sat in the passenger seat, silent tears rolling down her face like raindrops. "Dylan, maybe we should just go to them," she whispered. "Maybe if I go, they'll stop hurting you." I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. "Don't you dare say that." Inside, I felt hollow as a drum. All the recordings, the cameras, the allies, they were gone, scattered like leaves in the wind. For the first time since I was 12, I felt like that scared kid in the mine again, lungs full of dust. Trapped in the dark with no way out, I drove aimlessly that night, headlights cutting through the fog like 2 lonely searchlights. Haley had cried herself to sleep in the passenger seat, curled under my jacket. My chest ached just looking at her innocent face. Peaceful in sleep while nightmares chased us in the waking world, I pulled over at an abandoned gas station and killed the engine. The silence roared in my ears like an ocean. For a moment, I thought about giving up. I could take her across state lines, change our names, disappear into some small town where nobody knew the Carter name. But even then, my father's voice would find me in every dark corner, every sleepless night. I leaned my forehead on the steering wheel, eyes burning with exhaustion. That's when I noticed a faint beep coming from the duffel bag. I unzipped it carefully. Inside, buried under Haley's clothes, was the old flip phone. Its low battery light blinked like a heartbeat. I picked it up, and for a second, I just listened to the silence. The last time I trusted my gut, it had led me to the mine office. Maybe it was trying to talk again. I flipped through the phone's menu, looking for something I'd missed, and there it was, a hidden folder labeled Saved Mail. I clicked it. 4 audio files I'd never heard before. The most recent was from last week. Patricia. I'm telling you, we grabbed the girl and head south. Tom's got the footage destroyed. We're clear to move. My stomach flipped. They hadn't just bought Tom, they'd made him part of the plan. My hands were sweating as I copied the files to my laptop, praying the old phone wouldn't die before I could transfer everything. This was it. Evidence level 2, time-stamped recordings from a device they didn't know I still had, detailing premeditated kidnapping and conspiracy to commit child abduction. No more gray area, no more he said she said. I sent the files to my email and a secure cloud folder I'd made for exactly this reason. Then I drove straight to the one person I knew wouldn't look the other way, Catherine Miller, the family lawyer who'd handled my custody case years ago. She opened her door in a robe, hair in a messy bun, but her eyes went sharp the second she saw me. Dylan? You look like hell. They were trying to take Haley, I said. My voice cracked like I was 12 again. I have proof, this time it's airtight. I showed her the files. She listened, face hardening with every second of my father's voice plodding across the tiny speaker. Good Lord, she muttered. They've crossed into felony territory. What do I do? You don't do anything, she said, already grabbing her keys. We take this straight to Nicholas and Kespia's first thing in the morning, and Dylan, don't go home tonight. They know how to find you. I nodded, but a new spark lit in my chest. For the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe, just maybe, the darkness was cracking open to let in some light. The next morning, we walked into the police station together like we were heading into battle. Nicholas met us in the lobby, his face tight with exhaustion. Tell me you brought something real this time. I handed him the flash drive. Listen for yourself. He plugged it in, and the station's speakers filled with my father's voice. We grabbed the girl and head south. Tom's got the footage destroyed. No one can touch us, Nicholas exhaled sharply. Well, that'll do it. By noon, warrants were issued for Howard Carter, Patricia Carter, and Tom Brooks as an accomplice to conspiracy and attempted kidnapping. Kespias moved to place Haley under emergency protective custody, except this time, I wasn't just a scared kid begging for help. I was the legal guardian, bringing evidence they couldn't ignore. That afternoon, we watched from Catherine's office window as 2 police cruisers rolled toward my parents' old neighborhood. My phone buzzed with a text from Nicholas. We got them. Haley leaned against me, eyes wide. It's really over. I hugged her tight. Not over, but this time, they don't get to hide in the dark. 2 days later, I sat in the county courthouse, my leg bouncing under the wooden bench like a jackhammer. Haley gripped my hand so tight I thought my fingers might go numb. Across the aisle, Howard and Patricia entered in handcuffs, flanked by deputies. My mother still had her hair done perfectly, lipstick sharp as a blade, but her eyes darted around the room like a cornered animal. My father just stared at me. No anger, no shame. Just cold calculation, like he was already planning his next move. The judge reviewed the audio files first. Hearing my father's voice echo in that courtroom was surreal. We grabbed the girl and head south. Tom's got the footage destroyed. No one can touch us. Haley shivered against me. For years, their voices had ruled our lives in whispers and threats. Now, they were evidence. The Kespias attorney laid everything out methodically, the school surveillance showing their self stalking the premises, the motel photo proving they were tracking our location, the abandoned mine office with detailed maps of Haley's daily routes, and finally, the recordings from my old flip phone that proved premeditated conspiracy. It felt like years of silence were finally cracking open like an egg. When the judge asked if I had a statement, my throat tightened. They took my childhood, I said, voice shaking. I stayed quiet because I thought blood meant safety. That they were only ever loyal to themselves. I won't let them take my sister the way they took me. For the first time, my mother looked like she might cry for real. The verdict came fast. Protective order granted. Indefinite duration custody of Haley reaffirmed in my sole care. Criminal charges: kidnapping, conspiracy, harassment, child endangerment, witness tampering. Tom Brooks took a plea deal in exchange for testifying against my father. He couldn't even look me in the eye as they let him out in handcuffs. Walking out of that courtroom, the air felt different, lighter. Like the coal dust I'd carried in my lungs as a kid had finally lifted. Outside, a few neighbors and teachers were gathered. People who once whispered that I was dramatic or ungrateful stared at me with wide eyes full of something that looked like respect. Mrs. Larkin, our old neighbor, stepped forward hesitantly. Dylan, we had no idea it was that bad. I nodded. Yeah, nobody ever does until it's too late. Haley squeezed my hand, her face tilted up to the sun. For once, she wasn't flinching at passing cars or scanning tree lines for threats. The first night home without fear was almost too quiet. I tucked Haley into bed and sat on the porch, listening to the crickets sing their ancient songs. For the first time in weeks, my muscles unclenched. In my hand was the flip phone. I scrolled through the recordings, deleting the threats one by one. Finally, I reached the first file I'd ever saved, the one from 10 years ago. My dad's voice barked through the tinny speaker. Get in the mine, boy, or I'll show you real pain. I closed my eyes, letting that voice fade into the night air like smoke. Then, I powered the phone off for the last time. The silence wasn't scary anymore, it was mine. Inside, Haley called softly from her room, "Dylan, can we paint my window tomorrow?" Maybe Blue Eye smiled. "Yeah, Hales, any color you want." The symbol that had haunted our lives, voice in silence, had finally flipped. Their threats were gone. Our voices were free. I wasn't just my sister's guardian anymore. I was finally my own person, with my own choices, my own silence to keep or break. Some silences are prisons, but tonight, it was mine to treasure. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe to check out more stories on my channel.